Just before we start, I want to let you know that we've added timestamps and segmented the video into different parts in case you want to skip around.
Check this out. Take a look at this.
Jesus Christ, Charlie.
That right there is the mail. Now let's talk about the mail. Can we talk about the mail, please, Mac? I'm dying to talk about the mail with you all day, okay?
I know a lot of people were kind of upset about the Prismatic reveal, and seeing some of the aspects that weren't included left a pretty bad taste in a lot of people's mouths, and I get it. Bastion, and more specifically Banner of War, are kind of too strong to be in the equation, especially if you were to combine them with something like Knockout. We've also already covered a really strong, unkillable Prismatic Warlock build as well, and the link for that will be in the pinned comment just below. We'll also be covering Prismatic Hunter and some PvP Theorycrafts going forward towards the final shape. So to be sure you see those, you gotta subscribe. This build is centered around a long-standing fan favorite, Heart of Inmost Light, which was nerfed about a year ago in Lightfall, but is still one of the, if not the best, general-purpose Titan exotic in the game. We want to maximize some of the potential insanity that can come from its boosted abilities, and how they can interact by combining different subclasses and different grenades and melees together. I feel like I should preface this build by saying that I'm not really looking to compete with the current Strand Titan hyper-aggressive builds with 1-2 punch and Banner of War and a melee exotic, but I'm more looking at dealing with enemy-dense activities that don't require huge DPS checks. First and foremost, this build is very ability-focused. It's the sort of build you want to take into something like a GM or into the late stages of Legend Onslaught, and it has very, very loose requirements and is both easily accessible and it kind of sounds like a blast to play. Starting off with the super, and it is kind of an obvious pick with Bladefury. Because we know that the prismatic fragments base their effects around your super, it all kind of adds to Bladefury's dominance here, and we'll get into the synergy a little bit later, but other than being the highest raw damage super on Titan, we get to enjoy some of Strand's other bonuses. Another contender for the spot is Twilight Arsenal, the new Void super coming in the final shape, and from what we've seen it does really solid damage, and Void comes with some nice bonuses and synergy through Prismatic's fragments. For aspects, I've spent some time going through a lot of weird potential synergies. Combining Knockout with basically everything else on the list has its merits. The boosted survivability and amplified from Knockout are both two very strong points it has in its favor. However, I've decided upon running Consecration and Drengr's Lash, and one of the things I saw a lot of people looking at when Prismatic was announced was the melee conversions, Lightning Surge and Consecration. Combining these with melee abilities that have multiple charges, so Arcane Needle and Frenzied Blade from Strand Titan. And this build takes advantage of that and sort of cranks it to 11. Frenzied Blade already has a laughably high damage values, and having the option to convert that into a large AoE hit is kind of the icing on the cake. The real debate in my eyes is with Drengr's Lash, and by itself it works. It's a very simple aspect that can be abused pretty heavily through Heart of Inmost Light. Also in the wording, it mentions class ability instead of Barricade, and it kind of leads me to believe that we can pair this with Thruster to have an instant AoE suspend tied into a movement ability. Not to mention, Drengr's Lash also gives Titans some extra damage capability in burst windows like dealing with champs or mini-bosses. The movement ability here is pretty redundant, pick whichever one you're most comfortable with. I personally know that I'll be going with Catapult though. We have a lot of good options for grenades here: Pulse, Thermite, Suppressor, Glacier, and Shackle. Keep in mind we don't have Touch of Thunder from Arc, so Pulse grenades are kinda off the table. I've gone with Glacier grenades here. On top of their decent cooldown, they freeze enemies for the bonus shatter damage and help deal with unstops. Glacier grenades are among my personal favorites, and if we get any seasonal bonuses for stasis crystals or shatter damage like we have in the past, they'll be an even better option. Another nice option could be Shackle Grenade, but the Titan's Transcendence Grenade, Electrified Snare, and Drengr's Lash both kind of eliminate the need for Shackle Grenades. For melee, I've got to pick Frenzied Blade. On top of its conversion potential with multiple charges through Consecration, it's just overall the best ability for the slot. The closest competition here is probably Shiver Strike for its decent damage and good movement potential. Shield Throw also exists for the overshield on hit boost to survivability, but being able to grab Woven Mail from a heavy-handed orb exists as a counterclaim. Now Barricades or Thruster, and I've got to go with Thruster for sure. I explained it a little bit earlier, but Drengr's Lash seems to work with Thruster. This hands down makes it the better choice for content where you don't really need the Barricade. The survivability boost and being able to take a breather is nice, but having the movement and instant suspend from Thruster kinda outclasses it in most content. At the moment we've only got 12 out of the 21 total fragments, but right now, from what we've seen, I'll be looking at running a few of them, and of course they are subject to change. First up, Facet of Dawn. It's just Ember of Torches. Powered melee hits give Radiant, and kills give nearby allies Radiant. Facet of Purpose, where Orb Pickup gives a buff based on the subclass, and we'll get Woven Mail from Bladefury, so that's 60% damage resistance across the board. Facet of Ruin, which both increases the size of solar ignitions as well as the size and damage of stasis shatters. This one's great for what we're looking at, making Glacier Grenades and Consecration just that much better. At the moment, because we don't know how many fragment slots we'll be getting from our aspects, I've got 4 here, with a choice for a 5th potentially, but there is some competition between these two. The choice here comes to Facet of Balance or Facet of Hope, and depending on which one's better, I'll be using it if we only have 4 slots. Balance gives melee energy on rapid light kills and grenade energy on rapid dark kills, which is good because we are using both light and dark abilities and we'll be getting damage with both. Hope gives class ability energy when elementally buffed, so picking up an orb with Facet of Purpose gives us regen for our class ability. And with 100 Resilience, Thruster already has a 31-second base cooldown, so if you add both Heart of Inmost Light and Facet of Hope into the equation, we have near 100% uptime on Thruster and Drengr's Lash. The build functions around this sort of perma-ability spam power fantasy for Titans, freezing enemies, suspending them, slamming with Consecration, and it's all while maintaining 60% damage resistance from Woven Mail and the boosted ability damage from Heart of Inmost Light. The idea is to kind of fall into this loop where you pop Thruster, suspend a big group of enemies or something like a champion, before throwing a Glacier at them and then finally dropping an empowered Consecration down for big damage. Everything here kind of pushes that together too, the huge uptime boost from Heart of Inmost Light and the Fragments, and it does sound cool, but the stats back it up as well. Empowered Barricade ×2 from Heart of Inmost Light gives us a base 50% regen speed. That puts Thruster on a 20-second cooldown, and when we stack that with Facet of Hope, which based off the closest rate from another fragment, Ember of Singeing, which gives a 300% boost to class ability energy while enemies are scorched, I'll lowball it and say that Hope only gives 100% boost to the regen rate, and that leaves us at a 10 to 15 second cooldown on Thruster in between uses. Hey, sorry, just a quick editing note here. I actually got my math about this wrong. Thruster by itself has a base 20 second cooldown at 100 resilience, so all in all this actually is infinitely better, and the final total comes down to about 7 to 10 seconds, and that's absurd. If you just want to go off Heart of Inmost Light alone for Glacier Grenade, at 100 Discipline, which I do recommend, it's at a 1 minute cooldown. The Heart of Inmost Light ×2 buff drops that down to about a 7.5 second cooldown. And that's by itself as well. It doesn't even take Facet of Balance into the equation either, because we will be dealing and killing enemies through darkness damage with Drengr's Lash, darkness weapons, or even Glacier Grenade itself. Overall, I'm really excited. It's definitely something different. In content outside of boss damage, this will be my go-to build. I'll probably make some changes when we get the rest of the fragments and we start getting stuff like the exotic class item drops. Speaking of exotic class items, they are hard to speculate for because we don't know the full extent of their effects at the moment. Some that I'd like to see, Starry to Scales, Frosties, Fellwinter's Helm, and Karnstein Armlets, the list does go on, and in the Warlock video I talked about some specific to that build. These ones are sort of more for general, this is what I would like to see, this is what would be kind of cool. I think this build relies a little bit too heavily on Heart of Inmost Light to find good use from an exotic class item, but I guarantee that when Final Shape comes out, that'll be proven wrong. Overall, I would be looking for utility or ability uptime, some sort of effect like that, where I can still chain my abilities together and get, bonus damage potentially. But we're not too sure at the moment. So yeah, that's the build. Be sure to let us know any thoughts or changes you'd make, and tell us down below what you're most excited for or skeptical about going into the era of Prismatic and the Final Shape. But anyways, if you made it to the end of the video, thank you so much for watching. All of the resources that we used are down in the description below, and don't forget to like and subscribe.